Hey all, my name is Whitney Larson and I am guest hosting this week's episode of Inside Ag. Today I'm bringing you another Western Kansas girl who thrives on helping and educating others on ways to improve animal health as well as learning more and staying up to the newest technologies. Brooke grew up on a small farm with a love of rodeo in Western Kansas. She had early exposure to ag industry with her family having a commercial feed truck business. After a stint in Oklahoma for college in the oil industry, Brooke came back to Western Kansas where she now works for Zoetis as a dairy territory manager. One hazard of the job was meeting her now husband Noah, who is a dairyman at J7 Dairy. They are expecting their first baby Johnson next month. Hey Brooke, how are you?
I'm good. Happy I get to talk to you today, Whitney.
I know. So let's dive right in. We want to explain a little about what Zoetis is and what you do.
Yes. So Zoetis, more formally, I think we just came up on our 10-year anniversary, but we were formerly known as Pfizer. Pfizer basically decided to spin off their animal pharmaceutical piece. So what is now Pfizer is now Zoetis. And I work specifically on the dairy side. So I call on dairies to help provide them with different solutions, pharmaceutical needs for their dairy cows and all their replacements.
Yes. So when you say that, you're talking like antibiotics, any of that stuff to help with sickness.
Yeah. So I kind of like to think about it as a compendium of care because it's really changed, right? Like it used to be like, how can we fix this problem that we have on our hands? Now it's like, how can we stop before we have this problem? So I deal in vaccines. I deal in antibiotics. I deal in genomic testing. So predicting, like what diseases are we going to be up against? We also deal in different technologies to try to, predict what are these animals dealing with. So really the spectrum of health to provide health for these dairy cows.
So some of the testing that you do, the kids and I got to go tour J7 Dairy, which was super cool for us because first of all, I didn't know there was so much technology on a dairy. Second of all, the advancements that have come with stuff is unreal to me. And so one part of that testing was showing if a cow, now correct me if I'm wrong, will continue to develop mastitis.
Correct.
And so that's a huge deal for a dairyman, right? To know whether you should be culling or what you should be doing.
Yes. I mean, it is very factual that healthy animals are correlated with profitable animals. So for us to be able to predict is definitely something that the farmers want to invest in. So like, for example, with the genetic testing, we can say, is she inclined to have mastitis? Is she more inclined to have metritis? We can even look, we can predict how likely as a calf are they to have scours? How much milk is she likely to produce? So then when you can look at your whole herd and say, this herd is, or this group of animals has a very good chance of being very healthy compared to this one. These are also more likely to produce a lot more milk. You can make better decisions and also be preemptive with how you're managing those animals.
Absolutely. So that's unreal to me because I don't know how new this technology is, but I'm sure 20 years ago, people were still trying to decide who was going to have mastitis when and how to treat it and what to do. And now you're basically preventing it before it even hits the herd.
Yeah. I mean, because we're genomically selecting. And so when it comes to breeding, we're making sure like when we're breeding these animals, are we getting the best genes? Not, natural selection. And yeah, you're right, Whitney. 20 years ago was the technology there. Yes, but was it being adopted? Nothing like it is today,
Right.
And you've seen it, Whitney, in person. It's a simple ear notch test that doesn't hurt the animals, takes just a few seconds.
And it's tiny. Like when you say
tiny.
ear notch, it's like the end of a pencil eraser.
Yeah, little pencil eraser. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's so non-invasive, but then from all the information, the spreadsheets that I get on this information on all these individual cows is miles long, right? That we can, and you guys, you hear now about like people that maybe have casein allergy type issues. So they want to drink A2 milk. We can tell you, is there going to be A2 milk coming from this cow or not? Like that's how we decide whether or not it's going to be A2 milk. I can genetically test and know whether or not they're going to be pulled. Like, will they have horns or not? Just all these things that we can learn from that. But then, like, to your point, like when you're talking about mastitis, we can from then know what's our risk here. Are we going to be able to reduce this? In herds that we test with, we see huge decreases once they start testing and continue utilizing this information to better their herd. we see huge reductions in their incidence of mastitis or these different health rates just because they have healthier animals that they created from a simple little test.
Right. And so in turn, you technically are using less medications than you would have been previously.
100%, Whitney. Like that is, you're able to significantly reduce your antibiotics. Also, I mean, the other thing that you think about is what is it? It doesn't just take antibiotics to treat an animal. It takes labor, right? And
Right.
I don't know a farmer one that's not having issues with labor right now, right? So when you can reduce that also, that's huge.
Absolutely. That's a really big deal. So then as the territory manager, how many dairies do you call on, and what's a day-to-day pre-pregnancy? Because I know it's getting a little hard now that you're close to delivering. What's day-to-day life of Brooke look like being a territory manager?
So I strictly, like my customers are all in Western Kansas. So Western Kansas has, above national herd average size. So, some of my counterparts, like in Minnesota, he might have like 200 customers where I only have 25. So that's a little bit different. I really like that. My day to day, Whitney. So I spend a lot of time, things look a lot different post COVID, right? So a lot of my time is spent virtually communicating with customers or internally with my team of how, making plans of how we can support our customers. But I do a lot of, this is a big part of the reason I wanted to come to Zoetis. I didn't just want to sell drugs. I wanted to be able to actually like help. And what I do with a lot of my customers is I get to go in and we get to actually like kind of evaluate how they're getting along from a health standpoint and then come up with solutions to help them. So for example, let's say I have a customer come to me and is like, hey, we're having a lot of mastitis. We don't know, we can't figure out what's causing it. Can you put a second pair of eyes on it? Sure. We'll go in there, we'll evaluate their, how are they milking? How are they prepping these cows before they milk them? We might run different samples to see different cultures of like what bacteria they're dealing with and so forth. So then we can evaluate, what's actually going on there. Is the products that they're using of ours maybe to treat mastitis or prevent mastitis? Are they appropriate? So that it might be a day that I spend half a day in a parlor just watching cows all day. I might spend half a day walking calves, looking at calves, seeing their overall health. The other big piece that the dairy has is, and you got to see a little bit of this, Whitney. I remember you kind of being like, what? Dairies of today have high, intense records on all these animals. So they are continuously, whether if an animal's sick, they know how much the animal's eating. They know when the cow was born, when she was impregnated. Like all those things are recorded. So I spend a chunk, I would say probably 50% of my time taking those records and analyzing them, basically looking for trends, seeing if there's something, if they're saying, hey, our cows within 30 days after they have their calf, we're seeing a lot of mastitis. Can you help look at this? I might go spend half the day in the parlor evaluating, but then I'm also going to dive into the data to say, hey, when did this start happening? Did I see this increase of an event 30 days ago, 60 days ago? Well, hey, Western Kansas has gotten, how much rain have we gotten in the last?
I don't know. I'd actually have to look at my records, but I was asked this yesterday and we were at 9 inches total for 2022. And we've for sure passed that.
Isn't that just crazy?
By a ways already in August, which is such a blessing. I mean, dealing with the drought was not fun, but it's just a whole new world with us dealing with moisture.
Well, I mean, I can see it. Like, there's definitely like for this year, my dairymen are dealing with an increase in mastitis. Most of the dairies out here, they're open lots, so they're dealing with mud and so forth. I call them good problems, right? Like, you don't want to deal with that, but we can't go without rain. So that's a lot of what my day looks like, Whitney, is just a lot of trying to match up what's physically happening versus what does data look like.
So when people hear a Zoetis rep, previously with Pfizer, like I just thought somebody drove around in their van, was dropping off drugs, not dealing drugs. I'm not going to say that. Dropping off drugs, whatever people needed. But your job is so much more than just peddling some antibiotics and stuff. You're really digging into every herd that you deal with.
Yes. And and some herds that I work with, like they have their own specialists. They maybe don't need me, But the customers that I deal with, that a lot of them that are using my products, they just appreciate that support. Like that's an extra, we call it the value add that we bring with our products. And when Zoetis first approached me about applying for a position, I was like, I don't want to be a drug dealer. Like,
I mean, that's exactly what I picture.
Yes. And yeah, that definitely.
But it's so much more.
Yes, it is. And that's why I feel like not only do I get to help my customers, I also get to help like the ag industry as a whole. And then also, just like our local ag community.
Absolutely. So then these records that dairymen get, and you're calling on pretty large dairies. We're not talking small herds here. How long do they keep these records, or how do they keep these records organized in a way that it's not a mess to find when there's thousands of cattle in there?
Every one of my customers in Western Kansas has a database system. The one that I deal with most regularly is called Dairy Comp. So it is just basically a database system that they go through and enter the information on these animals. There's many others out there these days. I know some of my herds that I work with deal with like Bovasync. So those are some, but it is a data warehouse basically. And what's kind of wild, like another technology piece, is all these animals, as soon as they're born, as soon as they hit the ground, they get what we call an EID tag. So maybe you've been somewhere and, for example, I went skiing this past winter, and we had our tags that like allowed us to they'd scan before we got onto the ski lift. That's ultimately what these tags are in the cow's ears. They could scan me and they could be like, oh, Brooke, she's approved, she can go ski. Well, what happens at the dairy is they scan the cow and then they enter exactly what's going to happen. Like, she's getting vaccinated, she's sick. So that's all recorded in the individual employees' handheld devices as they're walking around the dairy.
So they're not walking around with a clipboard and a pencil anymore.
No. Clipboard and pencil, like they couldn't efficiently operate. There's no way. And that's, when we talk about like antibiotics and withholds and how do they keep track of all this, it's right there. The database system keeps it collected, keeps it organized for them. Let's say, for example, they have a pen of 300 cows and they need to go pick 5 of them out of there. Okay. They need to move them to another area. All that they can pull up the list that the data warehouse basically creates for them. They go through and scan each animal in that pen. And as soon as they come across the animal that they're supposed to pull, it'll tell them. It actually says need her.
Need her.
Need her. Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Right? Because these cows, they have tag numbers. So you could go look through every tag number. But Whitney, if I gave you 5 numbers that were each 6-digit long and a pen of 300
take you all
cows,
day.
Exactly.
Half a day.
Right? So no, that is how it's all recorded. That's how it's maintained. And then we basically just go through it and evaluate it. And
right.
Then, a dairy that I was at yesterday, they had records that I was looking at dated back to 14 because they wanted to see like, what has our progress looked over the last so many years? That's almost 10 years. So we pulled it up.
That's unreal. So you grew up beef side for sure. Beef community, your parents are selling, well, they'd sell that to mixers to dairy too, but a lot of your life growing up was beef. How has that transitioned and been a change for you to switch over to dairy?
Definitely. So where I'm from is from Scott City, Kansas. If you're familiar, like that is right in the heart of feedlot country. There's 600,000 head of beef animals in there. I grew up processing. I grew up doing all that. And I've heard people say like the only same thing that's the same between a dairy cow and a beef animal is the fact that they're bovine. And so when in the dairy industry, relatively, Whitney, is kind of new to Kansas. And I say relatively as compared to like Wisconsin or California.
Absolutely.
Dairy didn't move into Kansas until the 90s. So that's a good chunk of time, but not really in comparison to the rest of the world. So just in general, I think Western Kansas people, yes, we know we have dairies here, but like they're not intertwined. Like people know about the feedlots. You can go ask anyone on the street questions about a feedlot and they know. You don't as much with the dairies. So when it was positioned to me like a position on the dairy side of Zoetis, I'm like, I don't know. Actually, what I said was, I go, I don't know anything about those black and whites. Like, I don't know if this is right. And their response was, it's fine, Brooke. They're not even all black and white. You'll figure it out.
Like, oh. Good luck, girl.
but they told me the reason that they thought I would be a good fit for the job is because like I come from a financial analysis background, like that's my past history. And they're like, you like numbers, you like diving into data. I think you'll like this. They were spot on, right?
Turns out.
But that like the first month I was on the job with Zoetis, my boss, he was very much like, you can't go onto a dairy without like a fellow colleague. He was he was very nervous about like if I knew how to get around. And he was right, I wouldn't have.
Right.
You know, like there's just so many things that are so much different, and there's just so much. It's not just feeding animals and processing animals, like, and I'm simplifying what goes on in a feeder. That's not the case, but like, there's just a lot more steps I think involved in a dairy. So
Yeah. And it's funny, we take advantage of, hey, I'm going to go get a gallon of milk, and you have no idea the backstory on what all goes on that dairy between technology. And I mean, when we were there, I was truly baffled at the amount of information and things that are happening there. Just the feed rations alone, I was like, holy moly, we're putting all that and you're feeding it to a cow, and it was unreal.
I mean, there's not, we talk about, like there's a big deal to like push for internet in rural America. And Whitney, you and I have recently talked about this, when the phone lines go down. I cannot explain to you, like not having electricity and not having Wi-Fi or internet activity at the dairy, how much it just really clogs things up. Because you figure, like I was talking about this, the data warehousing system. Every day, the data warehousing system sends over to the feed system how many cows are in each pen. That decides how much feed is going to go in each ration to make sure that there is enough to specifically meet the needs of those animals.
So that goes down and you're basically working blind.
Exactly. You have to manually do it. Are guys capable of that? Yes.
Of course.
It's just we're creating all these efficiencies, and rather than getting done feeding at 4 or 5 o'clock, it's going to be 9 o'clock that night.
Right.
So it's and the rations are clear down to, we have machines called micro machines that literally, you and I get our pill of multivitamins out that's specially created for us. The micro machine creates a special makeup for each pen of cows, creates it and pushes it into the loader or into the feed wagon for it to be mixed up.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, very much so.
And those cows are treated like gold. I mean, look at the time and technology that's put into them.
Oh, 100%. Like me being pregnant, some people might not like appreciate being like using things to be like compared to a cow, but constantly Noah, my husband, and I are like comparing like different things I have going on to being a cow. But there's just so much like in the sense of like they're treated so well. Like it's the same thing. Like, hey, how would we treat this in a cow? Like, what are we doing with me?
Oh, just wait till you have that baby and start breastfeeding. He'll really have some one-liners then.
Oh yeah, my lactation specialist husband.
Yeah. So let's go into that. How has being pregnant and being a woman in this industry as a whole been for you?
So I definitely, this is our first child. So being just pregnant in general, I'm obviously super naive about. As I told you, I was really shocked. This is going to sound funny too. I think a lot of people have like, it can be pretty debilitating. Like when I can't get off the couch, I just didn't know that was a thing. Like, so take that into mind when I'm thinking about this. But I think, every job is different, but being pregnant in ag, I think there's things that I had to think about and take into consideration and evaluate that just, I didn't realize I was going to be thinking about, dealing with people. That's probably been the first one that's been interesting. I feel like you can kind of group people's reactions and how they like handle working with me, like being my colleagues, being my customers. You can kind of group them into 3 groups. There's the first group that's like super comfortable. They probably had a colleague that they dealt with in the last few years that was pregnant. They knew to be open, supportive, ask questions. Then there's the second group who is like super uncomfortable. You can tell like they don't want to ask anything. They feel, I'm like 20 weeks pregnant and definitely like have a belly. So I presume they know I'm pregnant, and that you can just tell like they don't want to say anything. They don't. So I've definitely figured out those are the type of people that I just need to be very open with, like to help them out so they feel more comfortable.
Right.
Like
And then there's a group that thinks you're handicapped.
Exactly, Whitney. Like just the presumptive group. And that's probably been the harder, like I think part of that is just because like being pregnant has changed from what I can understand. You know, it used to be like, you shouldn't exercise, you shouldn't do anything, you shouldn't be labor intensive.
And now it's don't change your day to day. Don't
change
what you've done always.
And there's also, you know, like I've dealt with like people being presumptive in the fact of like, oh, she's just upset because she's hormonal. No, I'm upset because I'm upset.
Right.
You know, there's that. There's, to your point, being presumptive that I'm just incapable. Or, you know, maybe it's like I have an opinion or a stance or like a finding on something. And they're like, oh, are you sure that you just don't have pregnancy brain? Well, maybe I do, but not now.
It could be, but.
But I think that like when it comes to like people, that's the big thing that like when people are just, you know, they'll ask me questions and just not make presumptions has been huge for me. Because, you know, there is things that I shouldn't be doing or, you know, don't want to be doing. And, you know, when individuals be like, hey, do you want to do this or would it be better if not? Like, I appreciate them because they're not presuming that I'm handicapped, but they're also taking into consideration like, hey, you are pregnant. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
So and I think, and like I said, just like trying to tell people, like, I just can't get over the number of guys that I've realized I've been sitting in meetings with, and women for that matter, that like, I can just tell they want to ask some questions about like, can we do this? Can we do that? But they're scared to death because I haven't even said I'm pregnant yet.
And to even me, though like, I'm rocking a basketball under my shirt.
Like, I mean, I've like joked, I'm like, did you guys just think this was a beer belly? Or, but they just don't want to like.
So we're for better knowing, we're 6 weeks apart pregnancy wise, and live in the same town. And the other day I went in somewhere. It was just 2 weeks ago. Are you expecting? And I was like, no, I'm fat. I mean, I look like I have a bowling ball under my shirt.
Well, and like, I appreciate people like not.
I do.
There's probably been some days that people might have thought I was pregnant and I really had just a beer belly, but
right.
No,
do you feel like you experienced any of that pre-pregnancy? Like when you started in the industry as a woman as a whole?
What do you mean by that?
Like people not handicapping you, but just being a woman in the industry that's flooded with men.
Yes. I think, and the thing of it is I figured out is the majority of people that will do that, it is with pure good intention.
Yeah.
You know, they were raised that, you know, women shouldn't do this and, you know.
Well, it's a generational thing.
Yes, very much so. And it's also cultural. You have to figure like with Zoetis, I work, you know, with a lot of people who are not from the United States, you know, Africa, Brazil, Argentina, you name it. And so a lot of times it's just like they were raised differently. Culturally, they had a different experience and they were supposed to handle things differently. So kind of taking that into consideration. And that's, it's just a lot of times just having those conversations. But yeah, no, there's definitely in the past, I've had some experiences where, and it's also, Whitney, it's not just the, you know, oh, you shouldn't do this. It's also the expectation that you will do something because you're female.
Right. Or can you even?
Yes. Are you capable of that? Yes, I'm definitely capable of that.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to show you now.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. I think the other thing that's been crazy, Whitney, about being pregnant is like with specifically the thing I do is like dealing with zoonotic diseases and then like the different like chemicals and drugs.
Yep.
You know, like I sell a hormone called Lutolife. If I were to
be very careful.
Yeah, like if I were to get it on my skin, it could instantly abort my child. You know, so there's stuff like that. There's different diseases that cattle carry. You know, it was brought to my attention by a vet, not even like my doctor. We hadn't really talked about it, but my doctor was like, my vet was like, hey, I really would suggest maybe you stay out of parlors right now because of lepto, which is it's a zoonotic disease that like I could pick up, but it causes abortion and you get it from urine. So when you're in a parlor, it can be close contact. I could come in contact with urine a lot easier. Like she was just bringing that up to me. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that.
So there are a lot of extra precautions you've been having to take to protect yourself and baby.
Yes. I would say like hygiene. I don't do anything on a dairy without gloves on, which I probably shouldn't anyways. Right.
Right.
But now I've just definitely been significantly more.
Your maternal brain is already ticking.
Yes, for sure. Crypto and cabs is not uncommon, but that's also a zoonotic. Like I could get it. So if I know of any going on that there's like an outbreak, yeah, I'm going to stay away from that. So it's just different. Like you just kind of got to change how your mindset is.
Yep, for sure. So do you feel like you had touched on the pandemic stuff. Do you feel like that made, I'm sure it made for more Zoom meetings, more over the phone calls, such. Do you feel like that's made your job a little easier or different? Or, I mean, would you prefer to be on the dairy talking to someone, or has it made it easy that you can say, hey, let's Zoom in an hour?
I like the Zooms. I feel like it's increased, quantity over quality. You know that saying? It has increased the quantity, decreased the quality. What I can go sit down in front of a customer or have a presentation or have someone, like a vet that I work with closely that I appreciate their opinion, having them sitting in a room and having a discussion compared to doing it over a Zoom, it's qualities
You can't match it.
significantly. Yes. Post COVID, I feel like as a whole, my job changed significantly in the sense of, and Whitney, like I know you've felt this, I know everybody's felt this in one way or another, but I spend so much more time trying to make sure that my customers will receive the product that they need.
Right.
Just supply, right? It's shipping, moving, like maybe we have it, but we just can't get it to them or whatever it be. I spend so much more time from like a logistical standpoint.
Trying to make sure they get what they need.
Yes. And then I've also definitely seen my dad was very big on like, if he was going to sell a feed truck to someone, he didn't want to sell it unless he could service it or like the expectations were set. He always wanted to be able to take care of people. So that was really instilled with me. So I feel like that's been so much more heightened because the service industry as a whole, I think has went backwards since COVID. I think, trying to find yeah. And so I feel like that's definitely intensified. So
and that goes back to the labor shortage.
Exactly.
Not being able to find help.
Exactly. So I feel like that's definitely been an increase in that direction. But that's the only thing that like I would say from like a COVID standpoint that's different is just how much more time I spend on that side, which I wish I wasn't, right? I wish I was doing other, but
that's where you're at
now. Yeah.
So do you feel like life is obviously going to change a bunch when you have a baby, but do you feel like it's going to make your job different?
You tell me.
Full time?
Just kidding. Yes, I do. I definitely do. Obviously, everybody keeps asking us, so what are you doing for a babysitter? And I'm like, that's a really good question.
Wait, I was supposed to find that already?
I'm like, I'm supposed to have that figured out. It's also interesting. So my husband is one of 11. His mom stayed home, raised them. When I talked about babysitters, he kind of just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, remember I'm going back to work? And he's like, of course. And I'm like, so what are we going to
watch it?
I think there was something about he was going to put a car seat on the flatbed and our German Shepherd was going to babysit. So maybe that's where we're at.
Perfect. Athena, she could do the job.
I think she could. Yes, Whitney, I definitely do. I feel like Zoetis is extremely supportive of working mothers. So
which is amazing.
Yes, they are extremely supportive. I think that the one thing about ag is people are supportive, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're going to have your ones that aren't, but for the most part, I mean, even like let's say just like if I can transcend it from being pregnant, not, I've had some meetings like I was super sick and I couldn't get to. As soon as I let my customers know, oh, no big deal, let's reschedule. So I think I'm just going to have to definitely work on the flexibility piece. A lot of what I do on the dairies happens early in the morning. So I'm going to have to figure like, how does that work? The good thing is I'm surrounded by half a dozen that I can think of right off the top of my head that I have had good conversations with already that I work with that are figuring it out. So I'm not having to cut the trail, I guess.
Right. Which is amazing for someone who's so passionate about her job. You don't want to, and there's some people out there that have the calling and yearning to stay home and to homeschool and do all these things. But there's also the flip side where there's those women that thrive outside of the home. They thrive sending their kids to daycare or to public school, and they just really love their jobs that much. And I respect both sides of that spectrum for all women.
Whitney, 100%. I mean, I see some of the things like you're doing with your kids and some of the things, like the gardens that you have and your chickens and all that. Like, that's probably something that I'm going to struggle to ever have because I can't do both,
Right.
So like, I think there's such good things on both sides of it. It's just, like kind of
And
how do you want to go
it's
about it?
okay to want those things, but not, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And I
Like,
think
hey,
that's
that'd be cool, but do I have time for a garden? No.
exactly like, like I see all your chickens and your ducks and I think that is so awesome. And then I think there's not a chance.
Your dogs would
I'm,
eat them.
yes, one of the 10. Yes.
Yeah.
I I think, and one thing that, I have had comments made to me by different people about like, oh, well, don't you think it's going to be really hard, for you being away from your child while you're trying to work or, kind of comments along those lines. And it's almost funny to me because I'm like, the comments are directed at me. They're not directed at Noah.
Right. It's almost
Because,
again, a generational thing. Like
yes,
women
100%.
aren't just staying home, and I'm not saying just, I'm trying to
Oh,
context
no.
that. Women aren't staying home and just raising babies and, wearing the apron and like the old generational. And there are some women that, like I said, thrive doing that. But there are some women that just want to have their space outside of motherhood, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have felt that
No.
tenfold being a stay-at-home mom.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, and I guess part of the reason I chose Noah is, I mean, like it's never, I recently got sick this past weekend. I've been sick off and on a lot. And Noah was like, hey, would you mind going, like I was on the couch. He's like, would you mind going to the bedroom? I'm going to just try to get this kitchen all cleaned up. Like it wasn't a thing for him to clean the kitchen.
Right.
And that's just awesome to me. Like that's the way he was raised. He was raised to do those things. And yeah, to your point, it's just a different, we both can carry the load. It's not just
Absolutely.
on me, which means like for my work, like I don't have to carry the whole load of it. Is there things that are going to happen, breastfeeding and so forth? Yeah. But I think a lot of that, like I said, goes back to kind of looking to some of these women who've already done it. And I've seen them be successful. So I think that gives me a lot of hope that I can be.
The movers and shakers that paved the way before us, I'm so thankful for all of them.
Oh, 100%. Because I mean, I just think of like some of the comments that are occasionally made to me or some of the boxes that I know that I'm put into at such a small amount. I'm like, I can't imagine how that was all the time.
Yeah. And but like you said, you've been able to see people already doing these things. And I'm not going to say successfully because I'm sure they struggle too, but you're seeing them do these things and life's just great and it's just fine and it's totally doable.
Yeah, exactly. No, I 100%. And that's, I think, I think it comes down to, do you have a supportive husband? Do you have a supportive company? And I know not like you can't, I'm super blessed to have that. Like I'm super lucky in that sense. And I know that's not always the case, but definitely I think makes a huge difference.
It's going to make your trying to blend it all together way easier.
Yes, for sure. And then I'm just going to buy my eggs from you.
That's perfectly fine. And if you need zucchini, I think I've got it coming out my ears.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to end it with that you want maybe somebody outside of ag to know about dairy, or even somebody inside the industry like me? Like we farm, but I had no idea about dairy, just like you, beef cattle going into dairy. Is there anything that you want people to know about your company or like dairy as a whole?
I think you said like my company, not all big farm is bad. Like that would be the number one thing. It's funny to me. I don't know if I've ever sat in a meeting where we just sat there and talked. The only thing we talked about was how can we be profitable?
Right.
Like yes. Do we sell and are we supposed to make money on the products that we sell? Yes.
That's how business works.
Exactly. But literally we know, and this would go to anybody that's like outside of dairy also, we know that healthy animals are profitable animals. So if we focus on helping our farmers create healthy cows, like they will do well, we will do well, the economy will do well. It's everyone. It's a domino
tenfold
effect, right?
for everyone.
Yes. And I mean, I tell all my customers when I'm in there, I would much rather be selling you genomic testing and vaccines versus I'd be selling you antibiotics.
Absolutely.
Like
let's take care of the root of the issue and not just put a Band-Aid on it.
Yes, exactly. And I know that if I'm working in that direction with those, they are doing a good job which means they're going to be here for a long time. So they're going to be a customer for a long time.
Yep.
If I'm just selling them a whole bunch of antibiotics right now, their business probably isn't looking so good.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, they can get antibiotics there's several companies out there.
Exactly.
But can they get the service and the smile, the service and all the data and everything that you're giving them?
I think that is probably the difference of when you're dealing with generic companies versus branded products. I think that's when you go into the generic side of things, you're not going to get the support that you're going to get. So I guess it just comes down to whether or not you value that. As a business owner, you have to decide. Maybe I'm spending a little bit less, but am I getting the value added support? Am I getting the reassurance that if something goes wrong with the product, that they're going to stand behind it? That's the difference. And only a businessman can decide, where they value that.
Right. Which is a huge quality.
Yes. And especially in today's day, when we talk about like lack of service being there, like sometimes you just need help. I mean, there are things that I work on that are completely outside the pharmaceutical space, but I know it's helping my customers.
Right. Absolutely.
You asked me about like what to say, like if there's anything like for people outside of the ag industry. I feel like it's constantly being said, but you brought it up, like go to the source. If you have questions about dairy, go to a dairy and find someone to talk to. Like
I found that they were more than willing to give our kids a tour.
100, and they enjoy it. Like my husband is not a big talker. Whitney, Noah, like he talks,
but he loves tours.
He will talk for days if he gets to talk about his cows and the farming and the technology, because he loves the technology. And I think that's a big part of it, is just get your understanding. Because I know going into the dairy industry, coming from the beef industry, I didn't know what I thought about calves being moved to hutches away from cows as early as they are. Like I was like, I don't know what I think about this.
And they're babied.
Yes. And that it's just, now that I understand the premise of it, I cannot imagine leaving a calf with the cow. Like I go into maternities and work with maternity guys, and I will see a cow, like them not getting a calf away quick enough, and a cow stepping on it, or her being a little bit sick, just being immune suppressed after having a child, and then her breathing and licking on that calf. And I'm like, get that calf away. Like this, that it's just, so I think that there's just these misconceptions that if you only understand snippets of it, you're not going to understand the big picture or be able to appreciate it. And that's like I say, at the end of the day, healthy animals are profitable animals. So you are highly wrong if you think that the farmers are only concerned about a profit, because if they're only concerned about a profit, they're only concerned about health.
Absolutely. And so any farmer, rancher, dairyman, I mean, there's so many facets to the industry of ag, vegetables, all of it. If you have questions in the store and you're worried about something, go to the source, like Brooke said. Totally contact a farmer. And if they can't help you, I guarantee you 9.5 times out of 10, they will find the answer for you, and it will be the correct answer, not something that an influencer or somebody has formed an opinion on. It will be actual facts.
For sure. I think about how many questions, Whitney, I asked you about, like no-till,
right?
Or what's the name of the weed that I can never say correctly?
Palmer amaranth.
That one.
Pigweed.
A pigweed, but like you have
our nemesis.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Knowledge is power, and I think it's so cool that so many are sharing on social media and getting to learn things via technology, because that's, like you said, we rely on it so heavily.
Oh yeah. I find it very interesting. Like I definitely think that cottage cheese is having a day on social media right now.
Oh, it is?
Like, it seems like every like health influencer is talking about like, put cottage cheese in here. Like it's super high protein, it's a lower fat. But I've also seen it's driven increased discussion around dairy. Is it always good discussion? No, but at least the talking is happening.
Yep. Which is always good.
And cottage cheese is just good.
It is good. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. And if anybody has questions about Zoetis or wants to contact you, what's the best way?
feel free to just reach out to me on my email. It's brooke.bulwer@zoetis.com, or also I have Instagram and Facebook.
Yep. And you recently just shared the fun reel for Zoetis, didn't you? A day in the life?
Yes, we did. We did a day in the life of me with Zoetis. It featured some of like my customers, and then it also featured like some of my time like going with Noah and some of the things that we do. So yeah, that was fun to put together.
So we'll all put that in the footnotes for everybody, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much, Whitney. This is fun.